Hello, everyone, cereal boxers and Phoenix Sisters fans. Welcome to this week's episode of Gilmore Sisters, a Rant Podcast. This week, we're discussing how not to Rory, advice for young professionals, and we'll dig into the meat of that right after this. La 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 la. Gilmore Sisters.
One nightmare destroyed Aidan O'Donnell. Aidan Gray, aka Scorcher, was born out of those ashes. The Forces of Nature trilogy is about the destructive powers of having superpowers that you don't understand and can't control. It's about redemption, about finding love and finding yourself. You can find the first two books, Scorcher and Thin Ice, online wherever books are sold. You can also pre-order the upcoming audiobook for Scorcher at www.kellyguentner.com. That's www.KELLYGUENTNER. Pokeballs by Crayle is your one-stop shop for handmade magical creations that celebrate all the Pokemon universe has to offer. Available on CrayleVanest.com, that's CrayleVanest.com, and possibly coming to a con near you.
Hey, Kelly, how you doing this week?
Doing okay. How are you doing?
Same. I'm okay. It's been a killer summer already, schedule-wise.
No kidding. Your June was insane, which is good for business.
It was, and it is. But also, so that Pokeballs by Crayle business that you just heard the little reel for, takes me to a lot of conventions. I was vending at Louisville PopCon recently, and I got to meet Scott Patterson, who plays Luke. So that was pretty cool.
That was amazing. I'm so jealous and so happy for you. And tell us about it before we get into the meat of the episode.
Yeah. So, first of all, my hands were like shaking, which has not happened with any of the other celebrities I've ever met. Like, I was so nervous. I don't even know why, because people kept coming up to my table with their signed headshots and being like, he's so nice. He hugs every person, like, whether they get the photo or not. Like, so that was really sweet. And since he was signing my name, he asked where my name came from. And I don't know if y'all have heard, but I have no idea where my name comes from. My mom, it's like in The Dark Knight when the Joker keeps asking people, do you want to know how I got these scars? And then it's a different story every time. So I told him some of the prevailing theories and stories I have heard. And one of them is that actually it's Russian for something. And that's the theory he picked. He was like, yeah, it sounds like it could be Russian. I asked him if he would be interested in coming on the show. And he has to do some like looking into it, of course, because he doesn't do his own scheduling. So fingers crossed there. If you follow any of Luke Patterson's social media and want him to be on the show, comment very politely and let him know that you're listening to our show too, and would love to hear from him here. But then the funniest part is actually after I went back to my booth, our network head for the podcast was at my booth because he was at the convention with me. And he asked if like how it went in general. I told him about inviting him onto the show and not knowing it. And he said, well, of course you wouldn't have an answer right now. They have to do some vetting to make sure you're not a crazy fangirl. And I said, well, I understand that, but I mean, it should come up okay. It's not like I'm trying to like get close to him to steal his cell phone number and text him what dream I had last night first thing every morning or something. And my network head, Johnny, the face he made when he looked at me, and I was like, okay, all right, that's that's a little weird that popped into my head that fast. And he was like, yeah, you're basically one step away from being one of those people who wants to wear their celebrity crush's skin as a suit. So I feel
like that's pretty vanilla compared to some of the things that people do to poor celebrities. But go on. Sorry, I cut you off.
It's just that it was so specific. So I don't think I embarrassed myself in front of Scott Patterson or creeped out Scott Patterson, but I did creep out Johnny, who owns the Cereal Box Network, a little bit. So that was a thing.
You know what? Better you creep out Johnny than Scott Patterson. And Scott Patterson, if you're listening, Crayle's not actually going to do that.
No, that was exactly an example of something I would not do. Okay. My brain just runs away with just really specific. My brain runs away with a hypothetical every now and then.
Our brains go to some really dark places. And that doesn't mean we'd actually act on it. Our brains are just dark. Our humor is dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yes, it does.
So
that's great, though. So, getting to the episode, this episode is going to be a little more practical, a little more down to earth after our last episode. Hopefully, y'all aren't disappointed. Hopefully, for the those who are maybe starting out their career, or even if you're not starting out your career, hopefully this is some advice that you can help or that is helpful to you. We're basically going to talk about what Rory did after Mitchum gave her that pretty harsh advice, and we're going to talk about how that's an example of what not to do, and we're going to talk about what you could do. And
if you're not looking for career advice, this should still be a pretty fun episode because we're going to give our thoughts about Mitchum Huntzberger, I think for the first time on the show. So, you know, tune in. Do you think Mitchum Huntzberger is as big of a villain as Rory thinks he is? Or, you know, is he just a product of his upbringing and privilege, whatever? But most of all, this is an episode about how not to Rory.
Which sadly, Rory is just not a role model in the later seasons.
No, I mean, it was tough for me being around the same age when the episodes were airing, because she started out one of my role models, and then I was like, oh, well, I'm gonna do that. I don't think that makes her a bad character or poorly written necessarily, but it did shock and surprise me. And so getting right into the meat of it, refresher for people who haven't watched as recently, maybe near the end of season 5, Rory has an internship with Mitchum Huntzberger, Logan's dad, who owns a paper in Stamford, Connecticut. And so she's worked for him for, I don't know, something like 6 weeks. And she's been, you know, passing messages and copying things and doing normal intern stuff, bringing him coffee. But she's really gotten into the flow of the workplace and been sitting in on a lot of meetings. At one of his final meetings where he's overseeing the paper before he steps back as the owner, Mitchum invites Rory to hang behind and get a performance review. And it's really, really harsh. He tells her that he thinks she's, you know, detail-oriented and competent and would make a good executive assistant or something like that someday. But as a reporter, because she hasn't been very vocal with him and he hasn't seen her dive into like the discussions in the meetings, that he doesn't think she has the drive to get a story. And as a reporter, she just doesn't, quote, have it, end quote.
Yep. And what we see of Rory in A Year in the Life, he was right.
Yeah, but at that point in time, though, based on the work she had done at the Yale Daily News and the way she keeps spec pieces and reads everything and researches everything, he wasn't right. And instead of telling him that, she goes off the deep end, steals a yacht, and drops out of Yale for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So
as you do.
let's-
Though
so
no,
to
that is not. That is not. Sorry. Go on.
Oh, yeah, no. So to be clear, I think that was a harsh way to give that advice, to just tell somebody, well, I don't think you have it. Change your dreams. But given what Mitchum had seen, Rory had not asked him for more responsibility. Her excuse for not diving in and speaking up for herself was, I didn't know I was supposed to because I'm an intern, which is a fair thing to not know, but she also never asked. So, especially if you're in an internship or a training job or something, if you get any second with your boss or anyone to ask, am I showing you what I need to show you? You should have been doing that all along. But if you haven't, I can completely understand being taken aback and taking some time to gather yourself. But something I think Rory could have done, and something you should at least try to do if you ever get like a really terrible review like that you don't feel actually represents your skills and the work you've been doing, is set another meeting. And I think Mitchum would have taken another meeting with Rory. I think Mitchum appreciates moxie in young professionals.
Yes, very much.
And say, look, I didn't know that you wanted me to be speaking up in the meetings. I don't think you've seen a full representation of what I was doing here. She could have gotten a review or a note from one of the other people she was working with. We find out in the end of season 6 that she had a good relationship with the editor of that paper, who's a really good person to have in your corner, editor to owner. She could have brought a review from him. She could have brought a meeting in with him and said, I want to learn. I want to do more. I don't think you saw everything I have to give. What do you want to see from me? And by the way, here are some parts of the job that maybe you haven't seen me doing. She wanted a summer job at that paper. I think regardless of whether or not Mitchum was convinced that she had it based on a meeting like that, I think he would have given her the summer job just to give her another excuse to fail or bail herself out. So, because Mitchum appreciates calculated risks, he talks about a person who tried to start a restaurant in a really competitive neighborhood of New York at one point in later seasons. His own son, he is really hard on in some ways and really soft on in other ways, but he still appreciates later when Logan stands up to him and quits working for him. Logan says that he was mad, but that also he could tell that his dad was proud of him for standing up to him. And that's through all kinds of personal baggage. So if he can be proud of his son for quitting, I think he can appreciate a young person saying, I don't fully agree with the assessment you gave me. Let me prove you wrong.
Right. And at the end of the day, one person's opinion of you, even if that person is really high up in your field, is not the be all and end all. And like Crayle said, figure out what you can do to change their opinion and take that negative feedback and use it as basically motivation to prove them wrong. If something is really your dream, especially in a field like journalism or something where having quote unquote it, that like je ne sais quoi, that's something that you can strive for. Some people may not agree that you have the talent or whatever, but talent is literally just hard work put into action.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And later she really does. She says, when she's talking to that editor of the Stamford Eagle Gazette, she says, Mitchum was wrong. And the editor tells her, yeah, you're not the first one to ever not get along with Herr Huntzberger. So if she had spoken to anyone else, I feel like she could have gotten a confidence boost from other people in the field who aren't her mom or her boyfriend or whoever. That she needed to either try to work elsewhere or try to talk Mitchum into giving her that summer job she wanted anyway. I One note I do have about Mitchum, though, where he was absolutely right. Rory almost turns that internship down. She turns him down. She says, thanks, it's a nice offer, but I'm not interested. And he asks, well, why the heck not? And her reasons are that she's worried that it's a pity offer of an internship, or that she's just getting it because she's dating his son or whatever. And he says, so? And that is good advice. I mean, don't put yourself in a position that you find to be degrading or something, but if you've got an opportunity in the business world, take it.
Yep.
In a year in the life, Mitchum is still offering, hey, I can harangue this person who hasn't been getting back to you on this job that you really want. I've got a connection. And she doesn't take him up on it. She still hasn't learned that lesson by the end of a year in the life. And by that point, even though she's not dating his son anymore, his son is engaged to someone else. Well, he doesn't know she's still dating his son behind his fiance's back. Whole other episode. We'll get to that. But he still, by that point, does respect Rory, because he saw a lot of what Rory had to give by the time she was the editor of the Yale Daily News. He even mentioned it in the New York Times. He name dropped her. You know, I gave her her first internship, and now she's the editor of the Yale Daily News, okay? And she's still not taking him up on using his connections. Don't do that to yourself. Like, take advantage of every opportunity you get. This is how not to Rory.
Yeah, pride. I mean, we all have pride, but like sometimes you got to put your pride aside and just accept any leg up you can get. Like, business is about networking, and networking is about personal connections. And yeah, sometimes that does get into nepotism and some stuff that feels a little icky, but as long as you're not like edging out, or I mean, as long as you're not immoral about it, use your connections and then earn your place once you've used your connections to get your foot in the door. Nothing wrong.
Absolutely. Well, Kelly, I want to know, since this is the first time we're really talking about Mitchum on the show in depth, what do you think about Mitchum overall? Because I have complex feelings about Mitchum Huntzberger.
Yeah, I do too. So I think, like you said earlier, he is definitely a product of his upbringing. I think he is not all bad, or all, he's definitely not all good. So he's definitely a jerk. He's definitely egotistical. He's cocky. Partly, part of his cockiness is earned, and cockiness is also a survival skill in the world he inhabits. So, like, to some extent, I can't fault him for his cockiness, but he's not always the best father to Logan, but in some ways he does make some good choices parenting wise. And yeah, he some of the advice he gave Rory was right, like you said. And he also, the fact that he does appreciate people who takes risks, I kind of like that. Like that's kind of a nice, or I don't know, I think that's a good character trait. But that also kind of still does play into his cockiness. Like, of course he would like people who take risks. Like, he would be drawn to people who gamble with money in the corporate world, not like. But yeah, he's not just a straight up dick like in Veronica Mars, where he literally plays the Casablanca's father. I was gonna say he doesn't play Dick; he plays the father of Dick. Or no, he does play Dick. Dick Casablanca's senior. I am having a brain fart moment. Yeah, he's not just straight through and through Dick, where everything. He's just a one-dimensional character, pretty much.
No,
he's complicated.
whenever Rory starts asking Logan, like, I need something to connect with him, like, and starts asking Logan things about the professional world, and he finally gives her something other than he hates peas, which was funny. Peas, ace peas. One of the things that he says is he tells people they can go at 5, but he usually stays till 6 or 7 or whatever the days of time he was. And I don't think it actually is like a virtue to work yourself to death, but I think he was raised to think that it was. And the next thing Logan said was, and he notices who stays. So as a leader in businesses, he does not ask things of others that he is not willing to do himself.
Which is nice.
He stays late.
Yeah.
And he doesn't require everybody else to do that, but he notices who's putting in the extra work. It's such a mixed bag. I think professionally, he is trying to do the best balance he can between professional success and developing the people around him. It's just that he's grown up with so much privilege and then just enough talent to make him not know how much privilege he has, that it just keeps skewing to that jerk side, you know?
I agree. I think that's a fair assessment of him. And the thing I like about Gilmore Girls is that there are no characters that are just one-dimensional villain characters. Almost none. Except for Anna Nardini, who just exists to be an antagonist because the writers were lazy. And that's not Anna's fault. That's a whole other episode. But other than that, every other character has just layers upon layers upon layers, like an onion and an ogre.
Like an onion and an ogre. Don't talk about Luke like that, okay?
That was a Shrek reference, okay?
So, I know it was, but
Shrek is a good comparison. Shrek is awesome.
Absolutely. I feel like Lorelai is Donkey just following Luke around the diner talking.
That is accurate. That is accurate.
Vampires and fairies, Shreks and donkeys. Oh, we got there again. This is supposed to be a serious
episode. Yeah. I think this is on brand for us, though.
Yeah, we tried. That's what counts.
To be fair, pop culture references are totally on brand for the show.
Yeah, I mean, the actors supposedly didn't even get all the pop culture references they were making all the time that Amy Sherman Palladino like was shoving into the show. So
how could they? There were so many. Someday we will do an episode on those, but we're going to have to look up a list and cross-reference. Right. If you want to help with that, send us a message.
Oh yeah, like pick a pop culture reference, explain it, send it to us. We'll bank it.
Please, because most of them went over my head. Not most of them, but a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you have any final thoughts on how not to Rory in the workplace, Kelly?
Pretty much everything she did, do the opposite of that. Aside from, so her asking Logan for advice on how to connect with Mitchum, that was good. And her actually, like, taking the initiative to learn about her boss and try to connect with him on that level, and taking note of what he looks for in employees or what she thought he looks for and just doing it was also good. But yeah, if you get your foot in the door anywhere, speak up. Offer. If you see a need, keep an eye out. If you see a need, offer to do more. If this is your dream job anyways. Offer to do more. Ask for more. Just, otherwise, yeah, pretty much And don't steal a yacht and drop out of school. Stay in school, kids. And
biggest
Grand Theft
biggest no not to Rory
boat is
advice.
wrong.
Grand theft boating is wrong.
Yes. Yes, it is.
All right. Well, this is Gilmore Sisters, a rant podcast presented by the Cereal Box Network, hosted by Crayle and Kelly of Phoenix Sisters Cosplay. If you love this show, please go to buymeacoffee.com/cerealboxpod and put a tip in the tip jar. And if you hate this show, give super generously. Become like a monthly contributor and be like, I'm here to make Gilmore Sisters better. Here's what they need to do. Again, that's buymeacoffee.com/cerealboxpod. That is my closer for the episode.
Thank you all for listening, and watch out for those fairies.
Yeah, watch out for the fairies, the vampires, the ogres, all of it.
The onions are what you really need to watch out for. Have a great week.
Have a great week.